What's up, everyone, and welcome into the Buffalo Sports Collective. It is Monday, May 20th, 2024. As always, I am PK alongside my co-host Phil for episode 286. This episode is going to be absolute controlled chaos, and as you could tell by my voice in the intro right there, I'm still trying to get my voice back. It's a slow process, and by the end of this episode, I might not have a voice, so Phil might be carrying the load here, Phil, but let's dive into the controlled chaos. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on X and Blue Sky at Buffalo Sports Co. Don't forget to follow our channel wherever you listen to podcasts. Check out our website at buffalosportscollective.com. Phil's final article of the year, haha, you have to write the last one, will be on the website this week. You can also check out our store. Yes, we have a store with all of our merch, so go celebrate the Buffalo Bandits victory by buying some of our stuff on the link trees on our social media sites and at the top of the website by hitting the shop tab. You can represent the BSC on the go and look for the time breakdowns in the description of the show. That will not be a part of this show because holy cow, Phil, Buffalo Bandits did the impossible of what we thought was not, what a lot of NLL fans and Buffalo fans thought was not going to be possible after a 5-6 start. They rattled it off. They went perfect in the finals. They went perfect in the playoffs and are now back-to-back champions and champions for the sixth time in their franchise history. An unbelievable run, winning 12-8 on Friday in Albany and 15-13 in Bandit Land to cap off a championship season. Phil, I just going to assume your voice is along the same lines as mine of just scratchiness because I didn't get much sleep at all.
Yeah, it's not I don't think mine's quite as bad, but it's not good.
Can you tell the difference in my voice?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah. Yours is very rough. Mine was rough going into the evening, and even this morning woke up and I've been chugging a lot of water. It's still sore for sure. And before this started, we were talking about what kind of episode we wanted to do, how we wanted to break it all down, and you at the the last comment we made about it was you saying let's just have a party, and I did bust out my "It's a Party" Bandits shirt.
Are we wearing the same shirt?
Okay,
it's
unplanned.
the same shirt then. Yeah,
we are wearing the same shirt, and so for those of you who don't know, we still can't see each other. Hopefully
soon.
This off season we will be working on that, but we did not plan this, and apparently we are wearing the same shirts. That's fun. Yeah, it was exciting. It was obviously exciting, and it was a weird second game in my opinion. And even walking in, you and I, again, unplanned, ended up getting to the casino parking and getting our preloaded cards before the game all at the exact same time, even though that was unplanned. And we walked in together, and we both had the same kind of feeling about the game, that walking into that game, it felt like it was over. And it wasn't necessarily how the players felt on either side, obviously the Albany side especially, but from a fan standpoint, going into a massive home game where you can win it all, it just felt over, and not necessarily like the fans felt like it was over. It was this weird feeling of just the game's already won, championship is already the Bandits, and it's done. Like they almost didn't even need to play the game. And you and I were a little bit concerned, and I think we both had the same feeling. And I just kind of mentioned, like, as long as the players don't feel like that, they should be okay. I do think the Bandits were the better team, just even heading into these finals. I think Albany's going to be incredible, but I don't think they're there quite yet. But it was a very strange atmosphere of it's a home game for the Bandits. They're not going to lose. They're not going to send it back to Albany. Like, they have this opportunity to win on the home floor, and it's just going to happen. And you and I, it's just one of those trap kind of things, that trap mentality where head into the game thinking like that, that's when all of a sudden, you get the upset out of nowhere and you're headed back to Albany. So really happy that didn't happen, but we are partying. Huge victory by the Bandits, back to back for the first time since 92-93 for Buffalo. First time since 2015-16?
Yeah,
for the NLL, and just really exciting. I mean, you and I stayed a really long time like we did last time, because you really got to just take it all in. I know as Bandit fans and analysts, we are ridiculously spoiled at this point that they've been to 4 straight, and now winning 2 of those 4 looks much, much better than possibly winning 1 and losing 3 would look much worse. Winning 50% of the championships, I think just looks good, especially when you win 2 back-to-back, but very spoiled at this point and just trying to take it all in because you really don't know when that's going to be pulled away from you. You know what I mean? At some point in the future, I have to imagine there's going to be a time. It's hard to imagine right now, but there's going to be a time when the Bandits aren't in the finals. So while they are and while they're winning, it's just, you got to accept it. You got to live in the moment and take it all in. And it's just so incredibly fantastic.
Yeah, you summed it up perfectly. Where we were actually told, "Hey, we're locking up the building. You kind of gotta start moving towards the exits," and that's perfectly fine. Even though Swinney said you can stay as long as you want, but I know you pointed that out right before we hit record. But yeah, it's like exactly what we were saying, and I said it midway through this season where you wish you knew you were in the good old days before they passed by, and I think since I made that comment, at least personally, I think I've appreciated what has been going on more than I had in the past because it's true. It was a bit different this year, sitting in the stands till the very end, watching all the players celebrate and that kind of stuff, than it was last year. Last year was like, I don't want to leave because I truly don't know, hey, are they going to be able to repeat? When's the next time we're going to be apart? And apart by meaning in the arena of a championship. And going into a 5-6 start of the season and even getting the 4th seed in the playoffs, the championship doesn't run through Banditland, and they had to take care of business along the way and get a little bit of help on the way. And I guess they didn't even get help because they had a host game 2 rather than 1 and 3 this season. So everything had to work out perfectly for not just another title, but another title won on the home turf where, hey, if they would have went to game 3 and they would have won it, you weren't a part of that unless you traveled to Albany, and that just would have hit differently because it's not in front of 19,000 Buffalo Bandits fans, which, it's definitely a special moment. So you definitely didn't want to leave. It definitely felt different than last year. Last year felt more, not emotional, but just like a buildup of so many years.
More emotional.
Yeah, it was just more of a buildup of just that long wait of it not happening. Where this year it was just like, it was a full-on party. Like last year, if you want to use the word emotional, it was emotional for a lot of players. It was emotional for a lot of fans. It was emotional for the whole organization because they finally got that monkey off their back. This year felt more like, hey, it's a party. It's back to back, and that's why we're wearing it's a party shirt. But yeah, I said at the start of this episode, if you've listened to us for 3 years, if you've listened to us just this year, if you've listened to us to the playoffs, if this is your first show, typically how we handle a recap game is we'll talk about an overview point of the game. We'll talk about the good and the bad things about the offense, good and bad things about the defense, goaltending, miscellaneous. Then we'll go over the milestones and whatnot. We'll still go over the milestones, but everything else is out the window right now. This is going to be just raw reaction wherever the heck we want to take this show. We have no plan going in. I have 11 pages of notes on here, and like 9 of them are due to just like milestones that occurred because there was a ton of milestones. But really, we're going to take this wherever our little brains take us. So if you like just absolute off the wall reactions, that's what you're going to get here. We're going to go into 7 different directions at the same time. Some of the stuff we're going to be talking about doesn't make sense to what we were just talking about. There's going to be very little organization to this show. So if that's not the type of show you want to listen to, you might want to stick with us until Friday. Like, skip this episode and enjoy when we come back on Friday. But this is going to be an absolute circus. It's going to be a party, and Buffalo just won back-to-back championships. And I think it's also going to be controlled chaos because you might not be able to pick up the words I'm saying. Because as I'm talking, Phil, the voice is getting much more difficult to understand because I'm losing it more and more as we go. So I'm not even sure I'm going to make it to the end.
Yeah, I mean, just going off of the comparison, because you just mentioned it, of the 2 championships, I think you explained it pretty well that last year was the 15-year wait, and it wasn't only just the 15 years, but it was also the 2 prior championships. Like last year was, this is your 3rd straight attempt. I know there was the COVID, breakdown and everything, but 3rd straight championship final that existed. And if you didn't win then, it was like, if not last year, when are you ever going to be able to do it? So like you said, monkey off the back. It was one of those just, breath of just exhale, the giant exhale of, oh my gosh, they finally did it. They finally won a championship for the first time in 15 years. Like, they've had so many incredible seasons, and to think of guys like Dane Smith and Steve Priolo that just hadn't had a championship yet in their entire career. They've had, mind-blowing careers for the Bandits, and they've been really, really good for a long time. And even I think the Bandits now are 5 of the last 7 finals they've been in. So to have that many finals and to not have won one before last year was just that, if not then when, like, are they ever going to be able to actually get it? So I do think last year's was a little bit more emotional, and this year, like you said, was a little bit more relaxing in a weird way. Obviously still emotional, still want to win, still want the back to back. You're hungry, and I do think, like all the players mentioned, that like that feeling doesn't go away, right? Like, even just us celebrating with all the band fans, 19,000 of them, like, it still feels absolutely amazing and a little bit different this year because it is back to back and you just won one, but still feels really, really good. It doesn't feel, any less exciting to get another championship. And it's extremely difficult to do in this league, to go through a 15-3 Toronto team to sneak past Georgia in overtime. I mean, they were 1 goal away from being out of the playoffs in the first round. And to think that it goes all the way back to that, to, a championship, and ended up winning 5 straight games and just sweeping the entire series throughout the entire playoffs is just insane. But the difference between the two, it's still amazing and exciting, but last year a little bit more emotional. This year, just a really good time and exciting to celebrate again, especially with some of the newer guys on the team like Dawson, Belter, Wires, Farrell, the guys who just weren't here last year and didn't get to experience it. Really cool to watch them get to experience their first title as well.
Yeah, I guess I'll try to point this ship in one type of direction to start. I'll start like I typically do with the offense. It was almost exactly how their season has gone when they're running on full power, where everybody's getting involved. It's not just like, again, Dane and Josh are gonna get theirs. Dane 4-14 and 18 on 14 shots. Josh 4-12 and 16 on 19 shots. They're the clear favorites. They're the clear number 1 and number 2 or double ones on this team that are gonna get theirs night in and night out. But it was the depth scoring. Nanakoke with 5 points in this series. Kluch with 11 points in this series. He came alive after a more quiet playoffs. You had Brandon Robinson with 3 points. Bucky was 4 points. Frazier with a 5-goal game 2 finals with 8 total points in the finals to begin with. But it was 15 shots by Nanakoke, 16 by Kluch, 19 by Byrne, 6 by Brandon Robinson, 13 by Bucky, 14 by Smith, and Frazier was 16. So it wasn't just one player leading the pack. It was everybody getting involved and spreading the ball around, and that's what you had to do against a guy like Doug Jamieson, was get him moving, because he has feet of cement sometimes. And that's not a knock on him. That's just the style of goaltender he is. It's similar to Nick Rose. They don't move much, and you have to get them off that placement if you're going to beat them. But game 1, we were watching it at home. Both of you and I did not want to leave our house. Just 1, because we were taking notes, and 2, because it was a long week and we were just dead tired and we wanted to just go to sleep after we were done watching the game, because, we kind of assumed Saturday was going to be a long day of just out a long time after the game. But it was more, they waited for the offense to come alive in the fourth quarter. And we saw that so much this season. And game 2, it was, hey, we're going to pour this on. They didn't trail once of that entire game. I think it was tied 1-1 at one point. And then I don't think it was tied again the rest of the time. And the offense came alive. And you could feel like, and I think it was Frazier said right after the game, they got their swagger back. Man, did they get their swagger back, because some of those goals with the hidden ball trick with Frazier and Byrne, which I think they were the only 2 in the entire arena that knew exactly what was going on, because I personally didn't. I had no idea, and then the ball's in the back of the net, and I had to rewatch the replay of what actually happened. Even Smoney said he had to rewatch because he had no idea that's what happened. But it was backhanded goals and swim moves by Frazier and behind the back backhands by Kyle Buchanan to even get the game started on a shorthanded goal. Yeah. It was it felt like their offense was not going to lose them that game. The defense struggled a bit in the second half. They struggled a bit on certain runs in game 2 after being able to carry the whole team pretty much this entire playoffs. This was the first game they allowed more than 10 goals in a single game, but it felt like the offense was like, hey, you guys have done enough. Climb on our back.
Pretty much.
We're going to just lead you to victory, and give Albany credit. They kept coming back, but this offense was just like, anytime it gets close, we're just going to go on a bit of a run here.
Yeah, I think the huge leads, I honestly think, hurt the defense and Vince a little bit. I think the whole team kind of eased a little bit at
In
times
the fourth,
throughout the
they
game.
did.
Fourth, absolutely. But even the 9-4, I think it was just such a quick, huge lead that they had not gotten previously in the entire playoffs. They had not run up a score that early, that quickly. I mean, the 5-0 at half against Toronto would be the next closest because it was another 5-goal gap. But scoring 9, everything was just coming really easily. And then Albany's able to close out the first half at 9-7. And then, like you mentioned, 14-8 at that point, especially the way that goal went in with the hidden ball trick. Like, they were just having fun at that point. Like, I think they just got too far ahead of themselves after that goal that everything... I mean, that was a 5-goal run by the Bandits to really pretty much put that game out of reach. But I think they kind of just thought it was over at that point. Again, especially with how that goal went in, and even Chase and Smith in the penalty box, both of them, and even Fraser getting that penalty. Like, normally in a championship game, getting a unsportsmanlike conduct for, taunting the Albany bench would be a big deal. It'd be, like, what are you doing that? That's stupid. Don't do that. But in this game, because of the score, he was laughing the whole way to the bench, and the team didn't seem to really care too much. Like, oh, it's a power play, whatever. Not a big deal. And then once he got into the penalty box, him and Dane were just chirping at Storos on the other side of the penalty box together. And it felt like they were celebrating too early. And I mean, realistically, the game kind of ends up closer to 15-11. I mean, Kurtz with 2:40 left on the power play, and then the 8-second left, last ditch effort where I think they truly had given up at that point, the Bandits. And I mean, 15-13. I mean, it definitely was still pretty much over, but Albany did not give up, and they got it close enough to be a little bit nerve-wracking toward the end. But I mean, the 14-8, like you mentioned, the offense just pretty much carrying a game kind of for once. I mean, yes, they've had decent games throughout the playoffs, and they've been okay, more than bad or anything. But I mean,
they've been
defense,
clutch. They've been clutch.
Yeah,
when they've gotten it when they needed to.
Right.
Otherwise, they've been kind of dormant.
But I mean, the defense has allowed that to happen throughout the entire playoffs. I mean, even the Georgia game, it was just 10 goals, and without the defense and Matt Vince playing the way they did in game 1, and even the Toronto series, that first one, 12-4, like the 12 looks great, but it's mainly because of that 4 that you were able to make that score look so good. And then the other one, just the defense and Vince allowing the offense to finally get it together in the fourth quarter with that 6-goal run. Like, that doesn't happen if the defense and Vince aren't playing incredibly for those first 3 quarters to keep the Bandits close enough that if they go on this massive run, they can take over the game and win it. So I mean, the defense and Vince deserve a lot of credit, but this game, for sure, they definitely struggled. Vince struggled a little bit. I think the defense struggled a little bit in this one, especially compared to how we saw the second half of game 1. I thought we were going to get a lot more of that, where they pretty much had solved Albany's offense, only allowing 2 goals in the whole second half. And I was like, okay, if we get more of that, then there's not going to be a problem. But they struggled a little bit. But like you mentioned, the offense just really took over this game, not only early, but even late with those huge runs. I mean, both teams had monster runs in this game, and it was literally what they always say, a game of runs. It's cliche, but that's what it ended up being. And the Bandits had the bigger runs and the earlier ones.
So, Phil, let's bring in another contributor to this party here on this Monday with our first sponsor read in Tap That Tap Room.
And before we get to the sponsors, I am going to thank them. And this isn't anything they do for our show, but just in general, having businesses, local businesses that support the Bandits the way they do, that Tap Room, shows all the games, has the parties, has the ticket giveaways, and they do a really nice job showing the away games, showing the home games if you're not going to be at the arena. And then Mr. Sizzle's partnering up with Dane, and just even them showing the games, just the way they support the Bandits. It's one of the reasons we kind of went after some of these sponsors because we're a big Bandits show, but also really great for them to be contributing to just any of the Bandits fans and the way that they can kind of show their support for such a great team. So thank you to them for being such a big part of the Bandits and this big season they had. But Tap That Tap Room is at 363 Delaware Street in Tonawanda, New York. They are Buffalo's first women-owned self-pour bar featuring 30 consistently rotating taps. They offer a variety of beers, ciders, sours, seltzers, and malt beverages.
So they have a lot going on this week. Phil, this throat's
you're gonna be
killing
rough.
me.
You're gonna be rough.
Euchre tournament is going on Monday, so today at 7 p.m. Get yourself included in that giant tournament they got going on. Thursday is their normal karaoke night starting at 7 p.m. They're still tossing out all the singers out there, and man, if I were to sing with this voice, Phil, it would put everybody to the exits. That's why I don't show up. And then Friday, Schitt's Creek trivia night. I am going to talk to Brooke to see if we can go to this one because we are big Schitt Creek viewers, and our wedding song was picked pretty much because of the show, which is a bit weird because it's a comedy show, but that's how we settled on our actual first dance wedding song. That trivia night is Friday at 7 p.m. So if you want to go to any of these events or check out what else they have coming up, check out their Facebook page or see what's on tap or what's on deck at their website at at tapthattaproom.com. Phil, I didn't want to end the show on this, and you talking about them covering the team and showing the games kind of wants me to dive into this. And I promise this will be the only negative we really bring up, a true negative on this show. Phil, I have a gripe, and I think it is time that I address it because it didn't have to happen. Like it really doesn't have to happen. And I'm kind of annoyed. Not just, I think they have reason to have a gripe, but I think they have no ground to stand on. And I will start by saying this, and I think everybody will know the kind of direction I'm going in. Media has a place in sports. Heck, we're kind of part of the media. We're a very small part of it, but we're a part of it. So I understand there's a huge section for the media in sports across all platforms, like on Twitter, writing newspapers, on the radio, on TV, whatever it is. There's a place in media. There's a place in sports for media. That's not where I'm attacking here. My point is there was talk, and this is not at every single person. There are some people out there that follow this team and cover this team year in and year out the entire time. Like it happens. Like they cover this team nonstop, and I'm not talking about those players. There's a certain amount of people that I'm not talking about here. So please don't take this for what I'm saying. Sorry, there's stuff going on my phone, so that's why I'm a little distracted here. I'm not directing this at those sole people that have been covering this team years on and years on, and
throughout the entire
I'm not
season.
talking about those kind of people. Yes, they cover the team nonstop. Sorry, the phone's going crazy. That's why I flipped it over. I'm a little distracted. I'm focusing now. This is about the handful of people that decided to start covering this team. And this is not me shooting down the people that are covering this team. And this is not me saying that we don't want more coverage of this team. We started this podcast because there wasn't enough coverage of the Buffalo Bandits in general. We want more coverage of this team. We want more people. We want more podcasts. We want more TV advertisements and everything. We want to grow the sport in this team. This is a gripe that I have about them thinking that they deserve a certain amount of whatever it might be by covering this team. There was complaints out there that Matt Vince, Josh Byrne, and Dane Smith were not available at the press conference after the game, that they were doing other things. They just won a championship. And this is across all platforms of sports. Like, this is not just based on the championship last night. This is my gripe on media as a whole when it comes to championships and big time wins. there's a time and a place to talk to a player. And I know that they want spots for their TV coverage. And I know that there's some live coverages that they need to broadcast it. So they need to get it in at a certain amount of time. I get that. But there needs to be a line where you can allow these players to celebrate what they work 365 days to accomplish. And sticking a microphone or a camera in the face of these players when they're just trying to see the championship trophy come onto the field. The players had no line of sight because there was a whole row of people. And again, I love that there were that many amount of people on the field to try to cover this team and broadcast it everywhere. That's exactly what this sport needs. But I just have a gripe about people that, were they around when it was 5 and 6? Were they around when they started this run? Were they around when Paul Dawson and Connor Farrell came in and Brownberry came back to the team being healthy and Zach Belter got healthy and coming back to the team and their team turned around? They were non-existent. They were not around. They joined on when the playoffs started. And again, I am perfectly fine with this. I want that to happen. But it's just they have no ground to stand on to complain about players not being available at the press conference when you're not there year round to ask them questions. Like that's my biggest gripe is, you have no ground to stand on for these certain amount of people. And again, there's a handful of people that are there year in and year out. So I'm not talking about them whatsoever. They have ground to stand on because they cover this team. Mine is just like, I'm not going to call out specific people, but there are a handful of people out there that think they might be, I don't want to use the word entitled, but entitled to talking to these players when you just came on when they achieved the highest achievement that they can in the sport. And again, I might get backlash for this. I don't really care. This is my personal opinion on it. And I have the microphone, so I can say whatever the heck I want. It sits bad with me when people are complaining players not being able to talk to a media. When you're on the field, you can go get a spot from them. Everybody was talking to everybody down there. And do I have a problem with that? Right after the championship? Yeah. But it's just, I don't know if you want to add to this, but it's just, that's my biggest gripe with the media when it comes to these kind of moments. I just wish that they would take a step back, realize, hey, there are bigger things than getting this immediate reaction from a player, where just give them 5-10 minutes to celebrate with the players that have won this championship with them. And then you can go get your spot. You don't have to get it immediately. You don't have to be the first one with the interview. It's just that's always what will bother me. No matter how far we get in media, I can flat out say I will never be the person that sticks a microphone or a phone in front of a player within 5 seconds of a championship victory. It's just it just feels wrong to me.
Yeah, I mean, it needs to be sectioned off, right? I mean, like, especially like you mentioned with the
Agreed.
championship trophy being brought out in a ceremony type situation and, players being blocked. I did see in the video afterwards when I think the whole entire kind of ceremony at the end is up on a video somewhere, but you could see Ian McKay like waving people around, like, move,
Right.
please, because we're trying to enjoy something that we've worked really hard for. And I think it gets lost that these are, like, yes, they're professionals and they're athletes, but like they're here for this. They're not. Yes, it's an entertainment kind of business and sport, but they work entire seasons
This
and, like
is
you
their
said,
life.
the entire year for this single goal. And they've mentioned it 100 times. Like, no matter how many times it gets it, it's the same thing. Like, it still feels amazing to have this monster moment. And you don't, I mean, it was the same with us. Like, we don't know when it's going to happen again, right? They don't know when it's going to happen again. They're trying to enjoy something that they work so hard to do. And all these people are in the way of them just trying to have their moment. And it's not right. And it's disrespectful to the players to not allow them to enjoy that moment. And I think it just needs to be sectioned off where, after the ceremony completely is done and they got the team picture, then go in while the team is just kind of spread out around the field and they're doing their celebration and it's a little bit more sectioned off and the players kind of disperse, right? I mean, but until that moment, until they have the actual ceremony, the trophy's on the field, Frood says what he's got to say, all the players lift it up, and like, even then, like, as the players are lifting it up and you start getting toward, some of the other players on the field where, like, if Vince goes and raises the cup and he's all done and you can tell that he's got a moment to himself or he's off to the side and he's not like right in the middle of something, then yeah, go get your interview with him if you need to. Same with Dane, same with Byrne, like on the field, if they have lifted the cup and that's all done and they are off to the side celebrating even with one or two players, like, yeah, fine, go get your interview. Like, that's a good time. But until they're at that point, like, let them just take in everything that they've worked for and let the actual ceremony present itself properly like it's supposed to, and just let them enjoy the moment. And until that happens, just stay out of the way. Like, there's fancy cameras out there. You can be at the boards and still zoom in and get all the shots you need from a little bit of a distance. I mean, you're on the field anyway. What are you getting in that moment that you need to be right in their face or in their way of them trying to enjoy it? So it is weird. And like you said, it's not just the NLL, it's across all sports that they just aren't really given any space to enjoy it. You have to remember that these are humans, not just out there for entertainment purposes to get that interview to, make our lives better. Like, they have also worked year in and year out for this moment, and it'd be nice to let them enjoy it for just a little bit before you get your interview.
Yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly, and I think that should have been the better way I would have handled it, is a different direction of how to handle this if it comes again. And I think my biggest issue is it just happened last year, so it should have been better prepared. I know it's all in the moment, so you can only control so much, but I think the way you said it should have been perfectly handled, where it's sectioned off, where, yeah, you're on the field, you can get the pictures, you can get the interviews, but let the moment happen. And for everybody that says, hey, you want this raw moment right after, the ESPN and TSN had a reporter between the benches that could be your designated person that gets that spot, that gets that interview, that gets the raw moment where, hey, as soon as they hand the MVP to Josh Byrne, he gets that spot and they talk to him. That's perfect. That's exactly what I want. And then he goes and does his own thing with the team. It's just, I think in the future, that's what I would like to see better is, and this is across all sports. I wish all sports would do this, where it's sectioned off, like you said, where it's reporters and photographers and everything are behind this line, and you can't cross this line until that moment is over. You can take pictures, you can do whatever you want behind this line on the field, but let the players enjoy the moment, because that's what they worked their entire lives for this moment. Cam Wires has never held that trophy before. Zach Belter's never held that trophy before. Connor Farrell's never held that trophy before. Let those players enjoy those moments without having to worry about tripping over a TV cord or running into a reporter or any of that kind of stuff. Just let these players enjoy that moment that they've worked so stinking hard for, and then get your spot. You don't have to get it immediately. And if you do have to get it immediately, guess what? ESPN and TSN have that one reporter that will get that spot, that raw moment immediately on that field. So that's I think that'll be the last thing I really say about the negativity. And it's more about what I would like to see moving forward, whether it's just with the Bandits, whether it's just with the NLL or across all sports. I would like to see it all across all sports, but I know I'm sitting in a corner twiddling my thumbs and I'm the only one that really cares about this. But I think to transition, and this is going to be a really bad transition, the third quarter for the Buffalo Bandits was unbelievable defensive wise. And this is what we saw last year with this team, is they went into the locker room, and I don't know what was said or what adjustments they made, but last year in the third quarter, they dialed it up, and the defense stepped up, and Mad Vince stepped up, and the offense stepped up. And through these playoffs, these five games, Phil, I'll give you one guess. How many goals allowed did Mad Vince and the defense give up in the third quarter in those 5 games?
4.
You nailed it. 4.
Oh, wow. That was
4
a guess.
goals. Yeah. It's an average of 0.8 goals in the third quarter through these playoffs. They gave up 1 against Albany in game 2, 1 against Toronto in game 2, 1 against Toronto in game 1, and 1 against Georgia. That's it. That's the amount of goals they gave up. It flipped back to what they did all last year, where the third quarter was just dominated. They outscored the team by 10 goals. Buffalo scored 14. The opponent scored 4. So it goes back to, I don't know what the heck is said in that locker room. Would I love to be a fly on the wall? 100%. But I think the third quarters is kind of what changed everything. And again, it was 5 goals by Buffalo in the third quarter in this game 2. And that's kind of when they broke the doors open and kind of took advantage and led the team to the victory. Was the defense standing on their head, man Vince making unbelievable saves, and the offense kind of finally coming alive in the third quarter.
Yeah, Buffalo headed into game 5. I'll try to do the math super quick. Headed into game 5, they were +3 in the first half and an incredible +13 in the second half for goal differential. In this second half, it was completely even, so they stayed +13, which is still really good. And in the first half, they were +2, so +5 in the first half and then +13 in the second half throughout all of playoffs. And that just really goes to show, I mean, obviously they won all of them, so you'd expect most of that to be in the positive. But at the same time, those first halves for most of the games throughout the entire playoffs were close, but that +13 in the second half is really where they took off. And most of the games were in the fourth quarter where they were able to either keep it alive against Georgia or put it away against Toronto and Albany. But this last game, it was that third quarter, like you mentioned, that really put it away. And yes, Albany made a little bit of a run in the fourth, but at that point, honestly, their last 2 goals to me are pretty much just useless. Like, I mean, 2 minutes and 40 seconds left, you're scoring to get within 3. It just, at that point, was pretty much over. So, I mean, to me, you're looking closer to 15-11 with 10 minutes to go before they score those last 2. And I think their run in the third was huge, but their entire second half play. And there was a massive, massive fourth quarter team the entire season as well. And we mentioned in the game 2 of Toronto, where headed into that fourth quarter, I was worried and nervous, but at the same time, I kept telling myself, this is a fourth quarter team. They're okay. This is what they do. I don't like that they did this all season, because this is the exact feeling you have going into that fourth quarter, is that they're either really close or they're down by a little bit. And you're like, all right, I don't like it, but this is a fourth quarter team this year. This is what they do. And that's exactly what they did against Toronto in that fourth quarter. In the second game, they just lit it up. Defense shut it down, and they closed out that game and closed out that series. And just how the team was all year. And it was just really great to see the little bit of difference. I think I don't know if I like, we've talked about this a little bit throughout the year. I don't know if I like them being a third quarter team versus a fourth quarter team. I think fourth quarter is better because they were better at closing games out this year. They were a really good fourth quarter team, but last year they were a better third quarter team than the fourth quarter. They would kind of let the other team creep back in, and they would just kind of weather the storm to hold on to a victory after their monster third quarter. And this year, they kind of flipped. They weathered the storm in the third quarter, like you just mentioned, without letting up too many goals for the other team. And then the fourth quarter, the offense comes alive, they figure it out, and they end the game. So pretty interesting to see the differences. But like you said, like whatever happens at halftime, continue to do it, because I mean, we've heard in the NFL, they go into halftime and everyone's like, oh, they're going to make half the time adjustments. And they said, not really. Like, we don't really do much. Like, yeah, we talk a little bit, but there's not really much you can change at halftime coming into the second half of a game to like completely change your game plan. And I don't know what happens for the Buffalo Bandits in that second half, but they absolutely know how to turn it on. And I don't know if it's a weather the storm, feel out the other team in the first half, and that's just kind of their game plan to do the best they can, score what they can, but kind of figure out what the other team's offense and defense looks like. And then in the second half, they just make some kind of subtle adjustments, turn it on, and end the game. And to see them go on a ridiculous 9-0 run to end the season to win the championship, just insane. And a lot of that has to do with how they did in the second half of all these games.
So before we move on with this controlled chaos episode, which you're kind of getting a dose of what happens when the cameras and microphones are not running, this is kind of what goes on behind the scenes. So welcome into the inside world of the BSC After Dark. Let's dive into our second sponsor, bring them into the party with Mr. Sizzles.
Mr. Sizzles at 346 Connecticut Street in Buffalo, New York, opening 2 new locations soon. I think I saw it. Hamburg was maybe July, fingers crossed.
I saw that as well. Yep.
So there you go. Possibly Hamburg in July coming up quick. They are open currently 7 days a week, 11 to 11, with a brunch menu on Saturday and Sunday from 11 to 3.
Phil, they've only been doing this since 2021, so all Mr. Sizzles knows is Buffalo Bandits winning lacrosse, and all that Mr. Sizzles has been doing is tossing out absolute delicious food. And I know we mentioned it on Friday's episode, but I'm going to mention it again. The Great Dane sandwich is out there. Go celebrate another championship with the Buffalo Bandits by taking down the Great Dane sandwich. It is fried chicken with hot honey, chipotle sauce, crispy onions, avocado, and pepper jack cheese on a brioche bun. Finger licking good, Phil. I know you had it. It was delicious. I was a little bit jealous you had it and took that order. But if you are interested in that or any other new item on their menu, because that menu has been almost out for a month now, so if you haven't been able to check it out, go check it out on their social media sites in person or at mrsizzles.com. Phil, I'm going to get the milestones out of the way so we can get these done and then kind of wrap up and do whatever the heck we want to do. All these milestones here. Steve Priolo is now in 7th place. He is tied with Chris Corbeil for 7th in NL playoff history in games played. Dane Smith, he's now in 5th place, all on his own in goals scored in NL playoff history. He also, obviously, because that was already announced everywhere, he overtook John Tavares for 1st place in assists in NL playoff history. Here it is. Assist-wise, the great Josh Byrne. He's all the way up in a 7th place already. He passed Sean Evans, Jeff Shattler, Josh Sanderson, and Jim Veltman in I think his 18th playoff game, 19th, something like that, maybe even 20th. It's unbelievable how fast he moved up. Dane Smith now is in 2nd place by himself in NL playoff history and assist. Josh Byrne has passed John Grant Jr. for 10th place, so we got 2 Buffalo Bandits in the top 10 in points in NL playoff history. Dane Smith did pass Mark Steinhaus for 3rd place in Buffalo Bandits playoff history and games played. Nick Weiss did pass both Billy D. Smith and Rich Kilgore for 5th place. Chris Cloutier did pass Micah Kersey for 5th place, so Chase Frazier is also right behind him. And I think they're both tied for 5th place in Buffalo Bandits playoff history and goals scored now. Ian McKay, he had 3 assists, so he passed Micah Kersey. Steve Priolo has 1 assist, so he tied Micah Kersey. Like I mentioned on Friday's episode, bad weekend for Micah Kersey. Kyle Buchanan passed Ryan Benesh for 8th place in Buffalo Bandits points in playoff history. Token Anacoke, he also passed Ryan Benesh. Nick Weiss passed Jim Veltman and Pat McCready for 4th in loose balls for Buffalo Bandits playoff history. Ian McKay also passed Jim Veltman and Pat McCready. Josh Byrne passed the 100 mark for his playoff career in points. John Tavares now has 1st place all to himself in games coached, passing Darius Kilgore. Connor Farrell he's tied for Corey Bomberry for 4th place in face-offs taken, and he passed Corey Bomberry and Rich Kilgore for 5th place in face-off wins. So a lot of milestones. Thank you, Buffalo Bandits, for accomplishing all of those and scoring a bunch of goals, so all these were possible.
Yeah, the dynamic duo, I guess they're okay. They're
going to be 1 and 2. Like, it's true, right? They're going to be 1 and 2 in playoff history if this continues.
If this continues, absolutely. Dane's
Stupid.
already 2nd in NLL playoff history in points, and I'm sure Josh, if he keeps up this ridiculous run, they both tied with 34 points in these playoffs, both ridiculous. So yeah, if they keep this up, they will be 1 and 2. And I know there is the French connection and things like that. I do wonder at some point, way down the line, hopefully after multiple more championships from these two, I do wonder if they will dynamic duo retire their numbers at some point. It would be interesting to see, and I think they obviously look like they're headed toward deserving it, as we've talked about a little bit of, like this team, and if they would have went 1 and 3, if they would have lost these finals, 1 and 3 doesn't look great, but now winning 2 of the last 4, it went from, is it ever going to happen, to, is this a dynasty? And I think you are well on your way, if not there, to just being a dynasty team, and just how incredible they've been, and just insane what the entire team has done. And those two are leading the charge.
Oh, I when you were saying that, I was like, are they going to get a statue? Yeah, that would be interesting if they got a statue, but JT doesn't even have a statue yet, so there's no way these two are going to get the statue. And then you said jersey retirement. I think they could put their jerseys up in the rafters right now, and I don't think anybody would really complain.
Well, I want to see it like the French Connection. I want a dynamic duo above
I got you.
And then I want below the 2 numbers.
That makes sense. Now I get you. But yeah, I guess that's the way we can transition it is, what does this, because like I said, we don't really want to break this game down because there's not a game that comes after this to kind of critique and figure out what's the next step, because they accomplished the end goal. So why would we break down a game where at the end they got their mission and there's not a next step. The next step already happened. The next step is what happens next year, and we got all off season to talk about that. But kind of what does this championship mean for this team, and what does it mean for the legacy of some of these players and for the franchise as a whole? And I think you summed it up perfectly. And what we mentioned it on Friday's show, where what happens if they do lose this one? What happens if they win it? And I think it answered the question, where it went from, hey, this is a team kind of like the Buffalo Bills. I know they won it last year, but they went from, hey, being to 4 straight and 5 of the last 7, like you mentioned, and they're 1-4 in this. Now they've won back-to-back championships, which is something that doesn't happen very often, not just in the NLL, but in sports in general, where it's tough to win the first one, but it's even tougher to win the second one because everybody's gunning for you. And you saw in the regular season, the Buffalo Bandits got everybody's best bet throughout the entire playoffs and throughout the entire regular season. So I think for me, it takes this from a team that was very good at winning games and getting to the finals, but wasn't good enough to win that end goal, to this is a true dynasty. They went from a team that, like I said, was very good to an absolute dynasty. And, if you want to say, hey, they're 2-3 in their last championships, yeah, but they won 2 straight. Like, if you want to just stop right there, they've won back-to-back championships in a sport where in the first year of unified standing, so everything was more difficult, where every game meant so much more, and one loss could have put you from the 3rd seed down to a 6th seed, and we saw that happen. And I think this kind of takes a player like Dane, who can break all of these records, but do you have the titles to back those up? Because a lot of people care more about titles than individual accomplishments, and including some of these players, and a lot of these players, and pretty much all of these players care more about titles than accomplishments. But when it comes time to determining, hey, who goes on your Mount Rushmore, or hey, who is the greatest teams that ever existed, it's these championships that matter more than individual accomplishments. And winning this one and winning back-to-back, I think, takes this team that was once really, really good and one of the best in the league to a dynasty in the making, and a dynasty in the process right now. And you're kind of talking this team with the greats of, like, how do they compare to the 92, 93, 96 seasons? And how did they compare to the Rush years? And how do they compare to the Rochester's back-to-backs, and so on and so forth, and the Rocks runs from years ago? It takes this team from a very good team to the elite company that they're in with now after winning back-to-back.
Yeah, and I think in a weird way that this almost makes you want to, like, if you're Vince, this almost makes it seem like you got to come back.
How far can you go?
I think that you almost want to come back because, I mean, he did this once before with Rochester, 2012, 2013, 2014. He had 3 in a row, and I think you almost want to try to do that again and really solidify. I mean, he's solidified beyond as one of, I mean, the best. I don't think, they always talk about, like even Johnny, like, some of his records are starting to fall and everyone's like, oh, what did happen? I don't know how somebody could ever really top what Vince has accomplished. I mean, playing literally half of your career in the championship is insane. Like, to be in a championship final every other season of your career is ridiculous. But if he can win 3 straight with this team, I think it already takes him to a new level, but I think he just might have that itch to try to three-peat. Like, yeah, 1 is great, back-to-back's fantastic, but if you can three-peat it, which has only ever been done, from what I understand, the NLL by him before, if he could do it again at this age, and just, I feel like he's probably got that drive to possibly get that and just come back. And please come back, Vince. Please come back. Don't leave us.
Yeah, we have the whole offseason to kind of speculate and talk about, life with Vince and life after Vince, kind of like what we did last year. But this team kind of, again, this is Control Chaos, so I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I think what you saw out of Matt Vince in these playoffs, and I think even going into the playoffs, the run that he went on, he still has that juice left. Like, he has not lost a step. Early in the season, we were actually even talking about it in this show. Has Matt Vince lost a step? He's not making those unbelievable saves that he's making.
Still very good.
That man he stood on his head multiple times in this playoffs, and he was making those saves that we had been accustomed to seeing out of Matt Vince. And man, he has not lost a step. He is still just as good as he was 15 years ago, if not better, because he has that mindset now. He has that playbook on all these shooters. And even if you want to go just look to, and let me try to pull it up here because I wanted to see what Simmons actually did for his whole game. Simmons lit it up against Matt Vince in game one. Ty Kurtz had an unbelievable game two against Delvin Shanahan. Simmons went 5 for 30 in shooting. And yes, he had 5 goals, but it took him 30 shots to get to those 5 goals. The defense did a very, very good job. And there were moments of lapse, but I don't really want to talk about that because end of the day, they won a championship. So they did enough to get their end goal. Were there slip-ups? 100%. But for the most part, I was very, very impressed, minus the first half of game one, what this defense was doing. And they were getting out on shooters 90% of the time. They were switching off perfectly. The communication back there was perfectly. They adjusted their game style. And we talked about it so much in the lead up to this game of what this defense had to do against this fast, chaotic offense. And I thought they played this team beautiful. I mean, Simmons was the only one. Walker went 2-10-12. He kind of went quiet in this series, and we said he was the quarterback. And if you were able to contain Walker, you were able to contain this offense. And I thought they did a very good job of it. And Kurtz was really quiet in this one. Paulus did nothing. Grennan did absolutely nothing. I thought the defense and Matt Vince were a catalyst in game one, and they did their jobs in game two to lead them to victory. And I thought if this is the type of defense that we're going to see and be accustomed to in front of the goaltender, if for some reason there is a life after Matt Vince after this year, I think they're still going to be good because of how amazing their defense can play in a multitude of different ways.
Yeah, and even to think of the depth on this team, like
Yes.
the people that were sitting, the people on the practice squad, all insane. Like when I saw Solver, who you and I are big fans of, when he got the cup and he was super excited, and I was like, oh, I really like him, and I wish he would get in more games. And to think of like Justin Robinson doesn't have a spot on the active roster, Sam LaRue, who's a transitioning, defender, but still would probably play in a lot of other teams, doesn't have a spot on the roster. Dalton Solver, who's really good as a defensive, younger, faster transition lockdown defender, doesn't have a spot on the active roster. Like, it's insane to think of the players that do not crack that game night lineup, and to think of what this team is likely going to look like next year. And again, we have all off season, but I think they have every opportunity to run it back. And like you mentioned, I mean, Vince or no Vince, obviously with Vince is a different story and a little bit more exciting. But even without Vince, if the defense can continue to play the way they played in the last 9 games, when they went on that 9-0 run and finally stopped their ridiculous 13 plus goals against per game, when they finally killed that run and started getting it to 12, 11, and then I think it was 9-7 or something to end it, and 5. And it was just insane what the defense was able to do. I know Vince was a massive part of that, obviously, but even still, I do think the defense, and who knows, again, future, what Dawson's also going to be looking at his age, winning a title.
Buchanan and Priolo.
Right, Buchanan, Priolo. I mean, they're players that can't be replaced, right? I mean, Dawson coming in changed the defense. And yes, he's going to be able to pass a lot of that veteran leadership on if he does not want to play next year, or the Bandits don't pick him up, whatever it may be. If he's on the team next year, a lot of what he was able to bring to the team this year, they will be able to carry forward, like the Wires, like the Belter, these, even Nick Weiss, everybody, Priolo, if he comes back, like all these players can learn from everything he was able to teach them since he came to the Bandits, and they can use that information for the future, and they will continue to learn what he taught them at the end of the season here next year. But if he comes back, I think you just have that veteran leadership and presence that made a difference in the end of this year. So a lot of big question marks heading into this offseason, like there are most off seasons. I think Vince is still number one, but Buchanan, a massively underappreciated
he was unbelievable
player.
In game one. Just unbelievable.
He's not replaceable. Like I don't know. Like, people can look at his stats or whatever, and he only gets a couple goals here, a couple assists here. He is an irreplaceable player, and it's just not possible. I mean, I don't see anyone else in the league. And yes, there's extremely talented players. He does something that most players do not. And it's just the nonstop energy, the hustle after every single ball, every single play. He has a knack for loose balls, creating those secondary, third offensive possessions on rebounds. He goes after every single play. He sprints off, he sprints on, and you're like, yeah, any player can do that, but they don't. And you just simply do not see other players in the league reacting and playing the way that Kyle Buchanan does, especially for his age. He's not crazy old by any means, but he is up there in his age, and just what he's able to bring to the team is simply irreplaceable. And he is incredibly underappreciated. And it's nice to hear the announcers call him out every once in a while, like, oh, another loose ball, look who it is, Kyle Buchanan picking up another loose ball and giving the offense another possession. And it's just the little things he does on face-offs alone, on offensive possessions. It's just his hustle to never stop, even when the possession's down to 5 seconds, the entire offense is off the field getting the defense on. He's the last guy out there causing havoc, trying to get a loose ball, or just forcing that other team to waste every single second of that possession before he sprints off and lets the defense do what they got to do. He's just going to be irreplaceable, and he's another one that's going to be really just difficult if he ends up hanging it up. I know we were questionable last year if he was going to come back. He did, and there's just a lot of question marks with this roster. Not necessarily that they're going to be bad by any means without these players, but they're still a massive part of this team. They're going to be very difficult to replace.
So we're winding down here. I think it would be a good the Controlled Chaos episode, I think, is summing up. I think it was a perfect title. It's a party, and you never know what to expect at parties. But I think we can kind of wrap it up here with whatever else you just want to wrap up with this team, and we'll kind of dive into Friday and Monday's show in a minute here. But what the plan is moving forward. But I guess any final thoughts on another back-to-back championship finish for the Buffalo Bandits? Because again, we could talk for another 3 hours about each individual player, but we're trying to keep it to an hour episodes as much as it's difficult to do. Shout out to Pat, who didn't think we could talk half an hour to ourselves. I'm going to keep saying that until this podcast ends, but I guess try to wrap up your final thoughts on another championship season, as much as it's difficult not to look forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy to do, right? I mean, we've talked about it a lot already on this episode. It's extremely difficult to win your first one, especially when you've gone to 3 in a row before they finally ended that last year. But it's that much harder to go back there and win again because, like you mentioned, every single team is gunning for you. They all want you out of it. And even Frood mentioned it. They all want what you have. And the Bandits were able to take it right back and disallow any other team in the league to have it for another year. It's going to be under Bandits control. I love the fact that they won the championship the last time with the last cup, and they won the championship the first time with the new cup. Really cool looking cup, by the way. I think they did a really excellent job with that design, but just an incredible season. I mean, to go 5-6, to have no panic whatsoever, to find a way to get all the way up to the 4 seed, to host that Georgia game, which was massive because you won in overtime. I think the home atmosphere of that game was huge. And I think getting all the way up to the 4 seed was something that neither of us really, I was hoping, but we were looking at 5-6 to simply make playoffs and for them to get to the 4 seed and then sweep the playoffs 5-0, end your season 9-0, just an absolutely incredible run by this group. And they lost some players in the offseason. They gained some players this season, but the team as a whole just played absolutely incredible when they needed to. Very similar to last year. They got hot at the right time. This year it was the defense that got hot. Last year was the offense, but just incredible way to put it together. And I mean, back to back, that's pretty much all you can say about it.
Yeah, it's just a huge congratulations to the players, the organization, everybody in the front office, everybody that works for the Bandits organization. Just a huge congratulations, because this is not something that happens very often in sports, is back to back and being able to do exactly what you did the year before. So a massive congratulations, especially to those players that won their first ones, like the Wires, like the Orlemans, the Farrells, the Belters. Huge congratulations on your first one. And I know your first one always tastes the best, because that's what Dane Smith said last year and Priolo said last year, and so on and so forth. But Just an absolutely massive congratulations to the whole Bandits organization. It's been for covering this team for 3 years now to be a part of all 3 finals and 2 championships. We're spoiled, Phil. We're definitely spoiled, although we have to go through Sabre seasons. So, it's the good with the bad. But I guess, again, we mentioned it. We can talk for hours and hours about each individual player, and we picked the Controlled Chaos episode because we knew not just breaking down this game because people wouldn't want to just hear about this play and this play and this play and what made this play happen. You just kind of wanted a party, and that's kind of the direction we tried to take it, and that's the Controlled Chaos in this. But just again, huge congratulations to the entire organization. This is not something that happens very often at all. But I guess looking forward, because we are a year-round podcast, we're the only year-round Buffalo Bandits podcast out there right now. We're not going away. So the coverage is going to keep pumping out. I guess looking forward, what to expect from us is Friday's show. We will be giving out the BSC nominations for the 3rd annual BSC award show for the Buffalo Bandits season. And then Monday, we will be crowning those nominees and those winners for our illustrious championship trophy that everybody wants more than the NLL championship or trophy. But stay tuned this week. We will be putting out the fan favorite vote for the BSC awards like we did last year. Just simply let us know who you thought was the BSC MVP for the fan. I'll have Pat make the graphic. He hasn't made it yet, but I'll put that out sometime this week on all the social media sites so you can go vote for the player that represented and was your favorite of the year. And I know Farrell won it for the Buffalo Bandits, but it doesn't have to be Farrell for us. It can be whoever you guys vote for. So that's what's on ahead. We pretty much are getting closer to our off-season mode, so we'll be dialing it back to just one show a week on every Wednesday, but we got more time to do that. Phil, is there anything else you want to add to this episode before we shut it down and go back to our normal working lives, and hopefully I have a better voice on our next show?
It's going to be tough to go back to our working lives after grinding through not just the entire season, but also playoffs and having pretty much a weekly game for a very, very, very long time to look forward to with the Bandits. So having that kind of chase and that weekend to look forward to being over is going to be tough. But if this was the way it was going to end, I'll take it. I'll take the back-to-back, and congratulations once again to the team, the organization, everybody involved. Massive, massive accomplishment.
Yeah, it's been another fun season of covering the Buffalo Bandits, and I'm not saying it because I'm sad it ended, but I'm looking forward to an off season of a little bit of a break from grinding out, because it's been a long, what is it? It's like 26, 27 weeks of this nonstop. It's I'm looking forward to a little bit of an off season, but yeah, on our next show, we will be giving out the nominations for the BSC Buffalo Bandits Awards that we will be handing out on the following Monday show. So with that, we will shut it down and everybody recuperate after a long weekend. These back-to-back games and these 2 games in one weekend, NLL's got to figure this out. I know there's some people out there, and this is another off-season topic, but I know a lot of people like the 2 games in one weekend. I don't. I don't. But we'll talk about that on a future episode. Thank you all for listening to another episode of the Buffalo Sports Collective. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at Buffalo Sports Collective, and on X and Blue Sky at Buffalo Sports Co. Visit our website at buffalosportscollective.com. Check out our store for our merch on our link tree on our social media sites or on the shop tab at the top of our website. Follow our channel wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you leave us a review on Apple and Spotify. Until next time, bye-bye.